Hello and welcome to another edition of Borders Rugby in Focus. With me as usual is Dale Clancy. Also in the programme today, a packed one it is. Rob Chrystie, will be hearing from him as well following his decision to quit Southern Knights to go to Edinburgh Rugby as the senior academy coach. We'll also bring you an exclusive preview of the Youngs from Jedburgh, which is a programme I've put together for ITV Border. That's happening on Monday night, so a little bit from that as well. And also at the Borders Book Festival on Tuesday night, a fantastic evening, packed out it was at the Walter Scott Marquee. Jim Telfer was there, Finlay, Calder and Tom English as well, who'd written the book called This Is Your Everest. So more on that a little bit later on. But let's begin with Dale Clancy and a look back at the week that we've just had. And it was curtailed a little bit because of COVID-19 and because of the weather, of course, as well. But 5 of our big teams got to play out of the 8. 4 of them won.
Yeah, obviously when you kind of seen all the call-offs coming on at the beginning of the week, it's probably been the hardest hit week for Border teams. But you know, the teams that got onto the park were able to try and continue with the campaign. A lot of teams winning. There was obviously one big defeat in there as well.
Yeah. Which one was that, Dale?
Yeah, I think that was the People's one, perhaps. But,
right.
Yeah, I think they struggle away from home. We've spoken about their travels before, how if they want to mount a serious challenge, they're still there or thereabouts, but there was a proper howking for them up at Hamilton. Tough place to go. Hamilton not really been going too well, but the other teams managing to put in good performances. Even Selkirk, I wouldn't say the performance I was at that game, it maybe wasn't the most accomplished performance, but it was a big win, bonus point. So that'll do their confidence the world of good as well. And Hoyk obviously start putting down a marker in the Premiership Challenge.
Now, I noticed actually coming back on the tram and then the train that I did actually bump into quite a few Peebles lads, and that was because they were obviously at the International Scotland against Tonga. And I think, some of the results that we saw at the weekend were caused directly by teams being well under strength. Yeah,
I think some of the guys that you maybe met, I think you got introduced to the Harrison boys.
Indeed.
Of which I think you knew 3 out of 4. There was the one that everybody always misses. But I think a lot of teams now, especially the international weekends, you could see, on social media, there are a lot of players you would be expecting to pitch out for teams of, are going up to Murrayfield and watching the national team, and rightfully so, perhaps. But I think that there's obviously still a lot of rugby needing to be played, a lot of clubs needing to be supported. So it's a bigger issue really than a player choice, because it was outside the international window. So it's a difficult thing to try and keep all the players playing voluntary rugby when they can have a big day up in the big smoke, having a few pints with their mates. So it's difficult, but obviously thankfully for most of the teams, they've never seen the ill effects of that in the Borders. The Harrisons, they barely play now anyway, so they're all injured. So one's a pro, so it's difficult. They wouldn't have had much of an impact on the People's game.
Going back to the match itself, it was interesting to see a brand new team, effectively. You had 8 new caps that day, 4 of them starting. And what a start for Rufus McLean. We'll take a little bit of a Border connection here, because he did play apparently for Melrose Hornets, I think, which is the real tiny ones. And what a start. 2 tries in the first 14 minutes, I think it was. A dream start for him. And then, of course, Kyle Steen scoring 4 tries.
The good balance in the squad was there. I think it's obviously outside the international windows, or you would call our big hitters now. They weren't there, but it was so good to see a balance in the squad. We spoke about this last week. For years, being a Scotland fan, there wasn't a lot of depth, but you've got 2 wingers there that have put their hand up for a start this week against Australia. But there's competition from Van der Merwe coming back in. Darcy Graham might shift to the wing. There's a lot of competition there, but Rufus McLean, especially his second try, as soon as you seen him step inside, the Tongan winger, his ankle going, and just dancing around. You knew it was just going to go, all over social media, and you'd see it all week. But that's the sort of moments that you want as a young rugby player coming through. We've seen him, start to develop, getting a lot of game time for Glasgow as well. So we know what he can do, but we'll hold on to that Borders connection as well. But it was good to see, a lot of players coming up quite well. I thought Kinghorn played all right at 10 as well.
Yes, yeah.
A good balance. Dobie getting on off the bench as well. So they've been able to blood in a lot of young players, but now. It's more about probably results now in the three bigger games, you would say, because it's a huge win that we got. But now Australia, South Africa, Japan, we really need to be, in John Barclay's words, picking up at least 2 wins out of those 3 tests.
And Tom English at the Borders Book Festival during the week, he made a very, very good point that, if you're Ireland or if you're Wales, who've had a lot of success in recent years, it's fairly easy, you would think, to sell out your stadium. But Scotland, we still go back to 1990 with the Grand Slam, and that's a long, long time ago, 30 years ago. And yet, we're still managing to get 3 out of 4 sellouts at the National Stadium, which is brilliant.
Yeah, it is good, and I think it's only good for Scottish rugby because that money goes back into the system in some fashion. So, the more we support the national team, the more we support our clubs. There's the club ticket initiatives. There's a lot going on, but yeah, we're still current 5 Nations champions as well. So we've got to grab onto that. So, going to Murrayfield, it is a good atmosphere. It's probably harder for Scotland fans. But you look at the football as well, you get a little bit of a sniff of success, and you get a little bit of the big moments that we've had. Obviously got to the Euros, and all of a sudden Hampden sold out for the football. So we're a great nation at backing the underdog most of the time, but we're a great nation at backing our teams and backing our sports people.
So Australia next, and there's another Tongan, in fact, who plays prop for Australia. He's now got about 36 caps, and he looks some kind of beast, doesn't he? And he's going to be a formidable front row opponent. But of course, no Rory Sutherland, because Rory has dropped out through injury, and Rory Darge is out as well from again the Borders connection with Melrose and the Southern Knights, and of course before that North Berwick.
Yeah, I think the Tongan Thor they call him, and I believe he got sent off in the time that Australia were last at Murrayfield. He was out, so I think in the press you see he's out for a bit of revenge, trying to keep his head because it was a big win we got last time. They came over to Edinburgh, so hopefully we can put in a good performance. But the players that you're seeing getting injured, Sutherland he's been remarkable where he's got to over the last few years from where he was with injuries. Darge is improving season on season. He's shown a lot of potential, at Melrose and then at the Southern Knights, and obviously on to Glasgow as well. He got Player of the Month there. He's in impeccable form. Unfortunately, he's went out with injury, but obviously Robin Hislop comes in and gets a chance as well. Obviously Langham originally played youth rugby through Hawick, so it's nice to see the depth now. You got a bit of depth. Players are coming in and you're not going, oh no, not him. You're actually going, oh, it'll be good to see him get a shot and get a chance. So a lot of depth in the squad. So unfortunate for a few players to drop out, but good Scottish depth now.
So the team announced tomorrow by Gregor Townsend. What's he going to do?
I think there'll be big changes. I think in the nature of professional rugby, the boys that went out on Saturday afternoon did their job, and I think they'll realise they're not the major stakeholders in the jerseys at the moment. It's part of the development process. And in years gone by, Stuart Hogg was in that position and Finn Russell was in that position. And when they used to go to summer tours and you used to see Finn Russell playing against the USA, now he is the best player in the world, or one of them at least. So I think there'll be big changes, especially in the backs. You've got a lot of competition at centre, but you would imagine Van der Merwe will come back in, Hogg will go to fullback, Russell coming in. Price obviously was 9, but he'll be a bit of a mainstay there. Obviously British and Irish Lions, so you'll see a lot of changes in the backs, some changes up front as well in the forwards, maybe a couple of changes at second row. I wonder if McInally will get a start, and Brown's in the mix as well. So depending on what they do, I think they'll look to get their heavy hitters out, and I think for 3 weeks in a row, probably Australia and South Africa will try and go full noise, and then probably Japan, depending on injuries and form, you might see other players get a chance.
So turning to club rugby then, on Saturday, and there was no Jed Forrest or Gala playing because of COVID, and Melrose's game at Stirling Wolves was off due to a waterlogged pitch. That game will be played in a couple of weeks' time, the same day as Jed Forrest take on Selkirk before the Autumn International. And we did have pretty good performances, though, 5 teams winning. And let's start with the game at Mansfield Park.
the introduction of Mitchell and Muir has helped, but the form of Morgan Tate has been really good. He's been scoring a lot of tries. He's quite lightweight, but really quick across the ground. His positional play is really good. He works hard off the wing, and you could see in there was highlights as well as of his try. Obviously, capitalising off a Mar mistake, pounces on it straight up the park, and he scores a try. They get 7 points. So, a good performance. Mar did get the losing bonus point, and it'll be interesting as the league progresses if that's going to come into play. But it's a huge win for Hawick, and it'll get their tails up. Bit of confidence, they'll be puffing the chests out for the foreseeable until they come unstuck again. But it's a big win, and it puts them a bit more kind of a realistic view at the top of the table now in the Premiership, and they are contenders now. I think it's almost a 3-horse race now between Curry, Mar and Hawick, but they've laid down a big statement with that win.
Also in the Premiership, it was the basement battle between Aberdeen, Grammar and Selkirk at Philip Hoch, and it was a 36-10 win, but it took a late couple of scores to put a gloss on the scoreboard, really.
Aberdeen rarely threatened. Didn't look like they were really going to get into the game. They couldn't really string a lot of phases together. So Selkirk really never got out of second gear, but it's a game which has probably highlighted how their seasons went, because they've been unlucky with injury, they've been unlucky with form, they've lost a few games, 3 or 4 games, less than a 9-point margin. They've only had 2 heavy defeats, so they've been there or thereabouts. But it's a confidence swing now, so that big win perhaps will get them a bit of confidence, because they had some really good tries in there as well. Some good play, good balance between Scott Clark and Callum Anderson at 10. I like the mix. Scott Clark's very controlled, a bit of a pivotal 10. You'll bring players into the game in a structured way. Callum Anderson's a bit more of a maverick. He likes to use the boot, crossfield passes, like kick passes, that sort of thing. Likes to kind of go himself, good pace on him. So, they've got a good balance there, but they're obviously missing players like Aaron McComb and the likes of that. But good bench. They brought off Andrew Rennick messaged me. He said there was a bit of weight came off the bench. So him, Peter Forrest and Joe Anderson came off the bench. 3 of them came off the bench, and I think there was space for about 8 once they'd left. But yeah, it was good to see them to bring that sort of experience on as well, especially Big Jock. Big Jock's got a lot of experience in Club Rugby South and Scotland Scotland Age Grade International and whatnot. So yeah, good win for the Selkirk at Philip Hoch, and it hopefully gives them a bit of confidence going into the next couple of weeks, because it's going to be a big couple of weeks for them in Jed.
Only National 1 team playing was Kelso. They squeezed past Dundee, but let's not forget Dundee had a great result the previous week, beating Ayr. So that's a good result in as much as, that's 2 wins on the trot, and they're going down to Watsonians for hopefully a 3rd win.
Yeah, I think they'll perhaps go down there and get the win, and it's a very difficult league, National 1 at the moment. We've been talking up bigger. We've spoke up Kelso and their early threat. Melrose looked really good. Gala looked pretty structured. But we all kind of forgot about Heriots for a wee while, and all of a sudden they're starting to clear up.
The top of the table.
Huge win against Boroughmuir last
92,
week.
Was it?
Yeah, an absolute howkin. So Boroughmuir and Watsonians look like they're the 2 teams which have maybe lost out the most from Super 6, but other teams have to take advantage of it. That's why they were all put in National 1. So the lie of the land of club rugby is a little bit more realistic. Obviously, it'll be difficult with the integration of the draft of Super 6 players and Premiership and whatnot, but it does make it more realistic. So Kelso, we want to try and keep that momentum going, and it's really tight. So we really, in National 1, I think there's maybe 6 teams that could potentially win the championship there. So it's going to be really interesting, but Kelso need to pick up wins. So good win against Dundee, and they'll be hoping to get the same against Watsonians this weekend.
Well, there was nothing in the East League for us. All the games were postponed. But the big semi-junior match on Friday night, Hawick Youth unbeaten against Melrose Wasps unbeaten. Well, it was 17-10 to Hawick Youth on that one. You saw the highlights yourself. You were at yet another wedding. But you did catch the highlights, and again, a good quality match.
Yeah, the highlights were really good. Obviously, I think the level, I've said it in the last few weeks, the level of semi-junior rugby has been exceptional, really high, and I think it'll be interesting when you start seeing all these national squads coming out, how many of those players are actually putting their hand up for national recognition as well, and that's something they should obviously put at the back of their mind and think, like, this could happen as well. I could get the national representation and get the thistle on my chest for even age grade rugby. It's such a big achievement, and it puts you on the map if you want to be a professional rugby player. But obviously a great display, a talent, open running, rugby. Obviously defensive play as well, with the two Finn Douglases all like locking horns, as you well predicted. So no, it was good. Hawick get the win. They've obviously got to go to Melrose and play them away from home later on in the campaign, but it's very competitive up the top of that league, and I think it's only good to see that there's almost two sides of semi-junior rugby. There's the sides where the teams have a lot of players and they've got a lot of talent. There's the ones that struggle, but I think the one thing that's been really good is the working together. Selkirk had a couple of People's boys and Gala boys a few weeks ago to fulfil their fixture. Obviously Jed and Duns have amalgamated to create a team. It's about getting guys playing rugby, especially at that age. You don't want people dropping off because the towns went by the wayside. So it's good to see them working together. But the game at the weekend was the game on Friday night was really good. And the Melrose Kelso game, the junior one, was almost one of the best games at rugby I've been at this season. So I was jealous. Although I did enjoy the wedding, but I was jealous that I wasn't at the Hawick Melrose game.
I'm sure you'll be at the return match then at the Greenyards, which is already, we're licking our lips about that one. OK, we'll have a look at the club rugby a little bit later on and what you can go and see this weekend. But the big news that came out this week was Rob Chrystie, who has signed up as senior academy coach at Edinburgh Rugby, working with Mike Blair, which means, of course, the head coach is now vacant at the Southern Knights. But this is what Rob had to say to me during the week.
Yeah, it was a really good season, as you said. I think a lot of work and effort's been put into it. And I think our support's grown over the season, which is really good. And I think that from a Southern Knights point of view, they're in a really good place to move forward now. And I think that's really important. The squad looks like they're going to stay together, which is excellent, and really quite exciting. So yeah, there's a really good blueprint here for somebody to pick up and run with, as you said. But yeah, looking, opportunities came around, and I think that the timing's right for myself and for my development, and I'm looking forward to what that brings. I love coaching. I enjoy working with players and try to get the best out of them, and ultimately that's what a coaching role is. But yeah, it's quite exciting to be going in to work with the senior academy guys at Edinburgh Rugby, and hopefully I can help them progress into where they want to get to.
Rob Chrystie, and he's done a pretty good job, hasn't he, at Southern Knights? Can't complain, top of the table after the 10 matches and making the playoff final, but he's done a great deal for the club.
I totally agree. I think it's a big void to fill because Rob Chrystie has been integrated in Melrose and the Southern Knights over the last few years, for a long time. And the one thing that's the biggest the biggest praise I could probably give Rob Chrystie is that when he's been in charge, he's actually probably pushed Melrose on a little bit further, because when Craig Chalmers was in charge and the transition from Craig to Rob, they've been successful and they've been really good, but he's seen them through such a monumental change in club rugby over the last few years, and he's grabbed that with both hands and made Southern Knights really, really competitive. And he said himself that they're the best club to coach. Obviously, he's going to say that, but with that in mind, they probably are one of the best clubs to coach, and it's got a lot to do with the way he has helped manage them get them where they are. I think the most interesting thing to come from it, though, is who is actually going to take over, because there's probably a few players, ex-players and coaches at the moment who have Melrose connections that could potentially put their hat into the ring and say that they're going to be the next one. But I think the most interesting thing to come from it is the fact that there's, the job is obviously vacant for the head coach. There's a lot of coaches now who have Melrose and Southern Knights connections, so they'll obviously be putting their hat in the ring because they'll have ideas of wanting to push themselves forward in the coaching game. However, I feel that the Southern Knights are a really ambitious club, so I think it's not a foregone conclusion that it's going to be somebody who's in the fabric of Melrose and the club and the Southern Knights. I think they could be looking a little bit further afield to see who's going to come in, and it's going to be interesting hearing the whispers of who's in the frame and who's not in the frame. Obviously, there's ones that spring to mind, but it's going to be interesting to see who gets that job, and obviously it closes, I think, in a week's time. So
yeah, November the 12th. Have you got your application in?
No. I don't think I could coach. Not a chance. I've not got enough knowledge. I'll wing this.
Yeah, we had noticed.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the interesting thing is Rob Chrystie obviously was embedded in the Borders. He was a player who started off at Hawick, played with Melrose, and obviously went south and played in England. But he was a Borderer, doing a Borders team, and there's always that danger if you bring someone from outside the area, you know, what are the dynamics going to be like? And at the same time, do we have Borderers with enough experience to actually go and do Southern Nights? I mean, obviously there's a lot that spring to mind, and I've spoken to a few of them, and we aren't going to name names here, but it's an interesting one of, you know, do you go for a Borderer, or do you actually bring someone in from the outside and you know, maybe change dynamics?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. You obviously know more than me, but it's quite an interesting thing to think. How do you change it? But I think the thing to remember is that the coaching pathway is in Scotland is pretty well mapped out. I think that you're developed quite well if you show potential, like a player. If you show potential as a coach, you get nurtured and looked after. So people might be advised that might be the best next step in their coaching career to go for. So I wouldn't necessarily. Some people might start moving across. Some people might move up. Some people might move what would be perceived as down into the Southern Nights job. It depends what their job role is now. But it's going to be interesting to see who gets it. And I think it's also going to be interesting to see where they go next season, and you know what kind of retention they get of players, what's the fabric of the team, what's the style of play that they've got, because this season it's been built on a solid foundation up front, and you know, a real structured playing in the right areas. They're a little bit different to the likes of Heriots and what's own ends in Boroughmuir, who maybe play a little bit more expansively, and Stirling County as well. I think Ayr and Melrose are quite similar in the style that they play.
So it's going to be very interesting to see who fills that vacant position left by Rob Chrystie, head coach of Southern Nights. Well, on Tuesday I went along to the Borders Book Festival, a fantastic evening featuring Jim Telfer and Finlay Calder and Tom English, who wrote the book with Peter Burns. The book itself was called This Is Your Everest. Lots of great anecdotes on the day, and we have the video for you available to watch at Borders Rugby Television at bordersrugby.net if you want to. We must apologise for the sound. Unfortunately, the sound guys, they did their very best, but they couldn't get us a good sound, so we had to use the camera. Hope it doesn't actually spoil it too much for you, but it really was well worth a look. And here's a couple of clips from that.
As part of this, I remember talking to Keith Wood, the great Irish hooker, and I asked him about Jim. We asked everybody about Jim, right? Of course we did. And I asked Keith about Jim, and I said, you know, how long did it take before you realised that he was the real deal? And he said about half a day. He said half a day. I looked at him walking around the hotel. I looked at him even before there was a training session. I looked at the way he carried himself, and he thought, and excuse me for swearing, because Keith Wood is one of the great swearers.
Yes.
Of our lifetime. He said, fucking hell. He said, I have never seen a man who was born to do a job the way that man. He was just made for it. And I asked Jono and asked Keith and asked them all about him, Pete Burns, we asked them all about This Is Your Everest, you know. And I asked Woody, and he said, I said, what is so special about Jim? And he said, it's hard to explain, but he's just got it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, he just understands the way we think.
Everybody knows that Everest is the summit, and so I used the press comments before the game that their scrum is weak. That was our scrum was weak, so I put it up on a notice board and stuff. And I made a list of the things that the press had said against the Lions, and that the All Black, the Springboks, although maybe weren't at their best, would still win. So it was early in the week I started to prepare, and the words just seemed to come natural to me. But they were, and I'm not saying I was reading from a script, because I didn't do that. I did when I played as the captain. I used to be really boring things up at the Great Hills Hotel. I mean, how the players stood for it, I don't know. Anyway, I had sort of special words I could remember, and I had a sequence and so on. and I was used to preparing things for school anyway. So I had buzzwords that I knew I had to get in, and that's how the speech came about.
And you also you use the silence as a part of your weaponry, don't you? You just hit them with the words.
I think silence tells you a lot, you know, and change of voice tells you a lot. Now that comes from, I suppose, teaching unruly children, you know. Sometimes children I couldn't control, but not very often, but sometimes, you know. I believe a coach is an actor. Sorry, a teacher is an actor.
Yes.
I think a teacher has to keep the audience or the youngsters interested in listening all the time. It wasn't so bad in my subject, I don't think, because I was a chemistry teacher, but you had to have meticulous preparation, because let's face it, you could blow them up every minute of the day if you wanted. You could poison them every minute of the day as well. So you had to make sure that what you were doing, safety was very important. So I had to be very well prepared in my preparations, and that's where it came into my coaching. But loud voice, quiet voice, shouting, then going quiet, then silence, making the players think what I'd said, you know, eventually saying don't get up until you've thought about your game and so on. So it's a bit of an act.
Jim Telfer in fine form there, and if you went along to it, I'm sure you got as much enjoyment out of it as we did at the Borders Book Festival. And Jim Telfer, sharp as a button, into his 80s now, and he never forgets an anecdote.
No, he was actually at the People's Club dinner a few years ago when I was still playing for People's, and there was an occasion when he got heckled, and he was pretty much straight back, sharp as out. So he's a good speaker. He's got loads of good stories. He's synonymous with Scottish national rugby, certainly, and you know, it's great to see him still have as much passion about, you know, championing rugby and his story, and a game with the Lions as well. The kind of the burst out from the Lions in 1997, really, with the Living with the Lions DVD. It's, you know, it's made him a household name in British rugby as well, so, and world rugby. So yeah, it's great to see him kind of still on form.
Yeah, an absolute living legend, that's for sure. Now, on ITV Border on Monday night, a special programme which I put together as part of the Border Sport in Focus series. It's the Youngs of Jedburgh, and that, of course, includes the twins, Gregor and Lewis, and also Glenn Young and Callum Young, and also Glenn's dad, who is Dougie Young, and a whole host of other people as well. It really is a fascinating story. And this isn't from the programme, this is a little exclusive for you, but I spoke to Bill Johnston, of course, another legend there from the BBC commentator and nephew of Bill McLaren, and he was actually commentating at the Commonwealth Games in 1986 when Dougie Young got the silver medal. So I asked Bill to give us his impression of the Young family, because he's very good friends with the family, lives just down the road from them, funnily enough, but his memory of actually doing the commentary for Doug Young back on the Commonwealth Games in 1986.
Well, it was very early in my broadcasting career. It was way back, as you say, in 1986. And Douglas Young, Glenn's father, Douglas was the captain of the Scottish amateur boxing team at these 86 Commonwealth Games held in Edinburgh, and they took place out at Ingliston at the Agricultural Centre. And Douglas boxed very well. He got into the final. And in the final he came up against this New Zealander, Jimmy Piau. And for 2 rounds Douglas gave him a belting. I mean, he really just sorted him out and boxed very well indeed. And well into the 3rd round he was ahead. But suddenly, out of nowhere, Jimmy Piau uncorked his haymaker. And I think by happen chance as much as anything, it landed plumb on Dougie's head and knocked him out. So he had to be content with a silver medal. But up until the moment that Piau uncorked this haymaker, Douglas Young was on the way to Commonwealth gold. Sadly, it didn't turn out that way. It's a great bout, and he'd boxed very well. And I think the whole of Jedburgh was tuned into the radio that night listening. There were some guys coming back from working over in Newcastle, and they stopped in the Carter Bar to listen to the radio, and the van was rocking as they got more and more excited as we went into round 3. And then, of course, it was utter dejection and sadness as Piau put in the killer punch and Douglas hit the canvas. But it was a great bout, and he did very, very well as the boxing champion. Big lad, proud lad, led the team by example, and he was a great credit to Jedburgh on that particular occasion.
And of course the Young dynasty goes back a long way, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I mean, Douglas was the boxer. Ian, his older brother, was played out here at Riverside for Jed, and is Gary, the younger brother. And Gary, of course, is the father of the two twins who are present-day players, Lewis and Gregor, and Callum, the younger one, also plays. And Lewis and Gregor have had a very good career as well. They've played in the Scotland 7th squad, so they've been capped at that level. And Callum has now been called up for the Scotland 7th squad and has played for the Scotland club team. So they've got a great record, and it's a tremendous dynasty. They're related to John Steed, who was the British running champion on the young mother's side, and also to Gregor McKechnie, who was a great star here a number of years ago at Riverside. Gregor is the twins and Callum's uncle. So, you need a family tree really to sort them all out. But there's a great tradition, great genetics in it. They've got rugby and sport oozing out of them. And there's another brother, Ronald, who played in the Special Olympics. And Ronald took part in the Special Olympics in badminton and swimming, and came back with umpteen gold medals in his particular categories and silver medals as well. And I remember he came into us one Sunday to see my wife and I, and he said, "Bill, do you want the bad news first?" I says, "Come on then, Ronald." And he said, and he held up a silver medal for swimming. He says, "I got a silver medal." Oh, and I said, "Well done, Ronald." And then out of his pocket, he was full of mischief, this Down syndrome lad. And he said, and look, he had a couple of golds as well. Well, my eyes filled up. I had to walk away. I was overcome by emotion at the sheer pleasure and delight in Ronald's face. So, the whole of the Young family has at some stage or another, and in some sport or another, participated at a very high level. And they're a bit like the Laidlaws, aren't they, It's a bit of a dynasty. This is the modern day one. Roy and Greg and Roy's brothers, Davy and John, all played for Jed, of course. So there's tremendous tradition in the Young family as well, and long may it continue. It begs the question, when they're finished, who's coming next?
I always said when I was younger that I would never be able to do the coaching and I wouldn't be interested, and I think kind of this year and it's kind of made me think that I wouldn't be able to walk away from the game I've give so much to, and it's been my life. We might have an odd break once I retire, which I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon. And I will, but I think I will. I'll go into the coaching side of things, and I'll obviously be helping Jed out whenever I can. So but I don't want to be talking about the retiring or anything.
That's good to
that's
hear.
Not on the horizon.
That's very good to hear indeed.
They've all had their success and still competing really strong. Glenn's obviously came through and pushed on even further, but I think it just helps that we're all brought up so competitively as well. So I'm wanting to be better than them at everything and better their accomplishments. Amazing watching them playing for Scotland Sevens and representing their country, sitting at home. I was so proud of that, and I knew that my mum and dad were so proud and everybody else, and I wanted to do exactly the same and hopefully get a chance again this year or next or whatever comes. Hopefully just to keep pushing on and beat them.
So that programme will be on ITV Border at 10:45 after the evening news, and certainly do recommend it. One of my favourite programmes in the series. And the Young family, I mean, we know obviously the twins and Callum and Glenn, but it goes back so much further, and very, very talented, the whole lot of them, through generations.
Yeah, I think you were mentioned, is Jock Steed a
Yes.
part of that as well? And, the running team, my sister used to run, I used to do a bit of running as well, and he was...
Hard to believe that, isn't it?
I know. I'd only run for an ice cream van nowadays, but they've got such a sporting like kind of mentality in their family, and are all very successful. I'm more familiar with the Youngs, the twins from Jed, and playing against them, commentating with over them for the last few years. So, I know their drive, that what they give back to their town. They're very proud, Jed folk. So it's certainly interesting to see all the kind of the sporting DNA which is in that family.
Well, a very varied programme today, but we're coming towards the end of it now. We're having a look at the events happening this weekend. Of course, the Scotland-Australia match is happening on the Sunday, which means we're back to a full programme on Saturday. And let's begin at the Premiership.
Yeah, obviously, Hawick will be wanting to try and make sure that they are still pushing on in the league, in the Premiership, and they've probably not got a better way to do that than play Curry up away from home, because that's another huge game. 2 big games back to back, a big win against Mar at home, and then they've got to go up to Millennium Park and try and get the win up there. Curry have been they've been kind of reinforced with the likes of Stephen Hamilton coming back from Stirling County from the Super 6. They've got, a good, really strong squad. Ryan Stewart, who used to play for Peebles as well at hooker, has been getting a good bit of game time there as well. So Curry, the current Premiership leaders, they'll be wanting to try and make sure that they kind of put a little bit of breathing space in between them and Hawick, but it'll be very difficult to keep Hawick down because they've got a bit of confidence from last week.
Selkirk at home to Jed Forest, and Selkirk have now put their noses in front of Jed.
I think that's almost one of the most interesting games of the weekend because of where they both lie in the league and what we both know they can do. Because Selkirk and Jed have really not been a true reflection of themselves this campaign for one reason or another. I think they've both perhaps suffered from injuries, they've had COVID issues, they've had games cancelled. So this is a good opportunity to have 2 border derbies back to back, because they obviously play each other the following week as well on the Friday night. It's going to be a big moment for both teams, because 2 defeats could really hit you in the guts and you could be sucked into that relegation battle. 2 wins could push you on further up the table and you start getting a bit of confidence. They won't want to win one and lose one, because they'll both be wanting to try and take full advantage of these 2 weeks against the same opponents. Very familiar, but going off the back of last week, Selkirk certainly looked like they were starting to get back to the old suitors that we're used to seeing, but it's going to be an interesting game. Border derbies are hard to predict in this, 2 points separating them in the league, I believe. So, there's not a lot between them both.
National 1, and the game that we'll be focusing on, the commentary match, will be Melrose at home to Ayr. And, of course, a month ago, that would have been a real interesting one. Since then, both teams have actually gone off the boil a wee bit. So it's going to be very interesting to see who comes out on top there.
Yeah, and I think even looking at that fixture on paper, it's I think obviously from a Borders point of view, the game we previously spoke about is the one that stands out. The one before that, the Hawick game, is one of the biggest games in Scottish club rugby. But the one with probably the most kind of recent history is Melrose Ayr. They've been the two teams at the head of the table for the last decade at least in Scottish club rugby, and the reshuffling of the landscape has led them to where they are. But they're still not out the hunt for the championship. Melrose were given a bit of a lesson against Gala, you would say. They were kind of bullied, and they were kind of pulled and pushed around the park. Gala kind of told them where they wanted to play. But knowing Melrose, they're a very proud bunch. They're again a very ambitious group as well. So they'll be wanting to try and make amends, and there'll be no better way than getting a win over Ayr, because there's a lot of bad blood as such. We've had the Frostgate a few years ago.
We won't get that this time.
No, there's definitely one. But they've had a lot of kind of small margin wins over the last few years with each other. So it's still a big battle, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing Melrose put in a more accomplished performance than they did against Gala.
And of course, before that, at 1 o'clock kicking off, it's the Melrose Storm, who we thoroughly enjoyed a couple of weeks ago as well in that match against Gala A, and they're taking on Watsonians A. So that will be an interesting little bonus that we'll have at the weekend as well. National 1 as well. Kelso are away at Watsonians. We mentioned it briefly earlier in the programme.
Yeah, I think that's a game that Kelso will be targeting to get maximum points from. However, not to take Watsonians too lightly. I think going off last week's result, you would almost go that the table lies, but the table doesn't lie too much. They've been poor to this point, Watsonians, so Kelso will be really targeting 5 points, but Watsonians might look like a different team. They might have had a couple of players back. I'm not too sure of the reasons why they had some upturn in form. Ayr might have fielded a weakened team. We don't really know, but what we know about Kelso is that they've got a style of play now. They've got a good group of young players coming through. They've got a good spine in their team, and if they go to Watsonians, to my side, and go with a real ambition of picking up 5 points, I've got no doubt that they're able to do that. But I think it's really in their hands.
Now, Peebles need to get back on track again. Glasgow Accies at home.
Yeah, they do. Again, I know I probably mention him every week, but I spoke to Greg and Greg Rayburn, the fly half for Peebles, and just disappointed with a lot of things. I think he was disappointed with they've obviously had a lot of injuries. The one thing I will admit, Ewan Jackson, who's he's been a great player for Peebles over the last few years, he injured his knee, so hopefully it's not too bad. He was unable to get scanned during the week, so that's the kind of luck that Peebles have had. Some of their big players have been getting injured. They've not lost their some of the maybe the fringe players or some players, but they've got depth. They've lost some big hitters. The likes of Greg, they lost at the start. Jacko, they've lost now. Ryan, they've lost. Neil Hogarth, their captain, they've lost. They've lost players in the middle row. Discipline with Roddy Guinea, but they've lost a lot of players for one reason or another. And I think that's almost the thing that'll take the wheels off their campaign. But they're still there or thereabouts in the league. I think last week, if they'd beaten Hamilton, it pushes them closer to GHK. However, there was an absolute howking, and I think the confidence was starting to go from them early on in that game. Maybe a little bit of unrest between the players because of it being a poor performance, and you get frustrated. But I'm sure they'll be looking at home as well. The Gates has been a good ground for them, so they'll be looking to try and get the win and try and get back up in there, because it's still a long way to go in that campaign, and anything can happen at GHK. But you need to hunt them down. You can ill afford to lose games now in that league.
Berwick in National 3 have been finding their feet a lot more in recent weeks and getting some big scalps, and now they've got Strathmore.
Yeah, Strathmore just a couple of places above the bottom of the table, so they've not been playing too well. And I think that's a game that Berwick will be looking to really pick up maximum points. Berwick, again, we've said they've had a couple of unfortunate, defeats away from home from what they said was a bit of naivety and a little bit of mismanagement of the game, and they picked up some good wins as well. But Last Wade at the top of that league look like they're really pushing on. They're going to be hard to catch. But
only unbeaten team so far in the national leagues. Yeah,
and it's a good. It's a good accolade to have at this stage in the season, because especially the way the seasons went with players dropping out and this, that and the other reason, injuries and events, and people want a social life back after COVID and whatnot. But for Last Wade, they've always been a bit of a yo-yo team as well. They've kind of pushed on and then faded away, but it looks like they're pushing on again. But Berwick really need to hunt them down. They need to make sure they're picking up wins if they want to be in the mix come the end of the season for promotion, because it looks like it's Last Wade's to lose at the moment. But you can win it. You can win this many games to this point. You still need to go away from home. They might have won tight games at home. They need to go down to Scremerston and places like that and turn Berwick over on their own patch. So still a long way to go.
Two matches in the East League. Duns are at home to Linlithgow in East 1, and in East 2, Hoyt Lindeen at home to Livingston.
Yeah, we spoke about the East Leagues in the last few weeks, and it's obviously been disrupted mostly by COVID and call-offs and front row. But both of those teams, Duns will be wanting to try, and they've not had the best of campaigns. If we're being frank about it, they've kind of been on the back of some heavy defeats and not really got going. Lindeen have fluttered. They've had some good wins and some defeats in there as well, but a bit of a mixed bag. But both teams will be just hoping that they can get a little bit of a run of games now. Obviously Langham aren't playing this week. They've got a few games and they're off again because of the numbers in the league and whatnot and the way it's structured. So they'll just be wanting that bit of continuity, try and get some games under their belt and get a win, and then enjoy the national games when they come after.
Tennent's East Reserve 1 and 2, the fixtures on the screen now, and also the semi-junior Border League, and some tasty derbies in that one. Kelso Quins against Hoyt Youth, of course, stands out.
Yeah, Kelso were one of the teams that were unbeaten up until a few weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago, and they really looked like they were in the mix, but they've fallen away a little bit, and the other teams have stole a march in them, likes of Melrose, likes of Hoyt Youth, Peebles as well, perhaps. They're another team who have maybe played quite well over the last few weeks, but Kelso then fall under the radar a wee bit. They were outplayed by Melrose when they went to Pointer Park on Friday night a few weeks ago, but Kelso will be wanting to try and galvanise themselves, get a win and get back in the campaign, and there's nothing better as going into a game as the underdog against an undefeated team, because you've got no expectations. The expectation is Hoyt Youth go there, maintain that unbeaten run. So Kelso will be, targeting them and wanting to be that team to turn them over.
And Gala Wanderers in the last few weeks have been doing very, very well, getting some big results, and they go to Melrose Voss, so that's a tasty one as well.
Yeah, I again noticed on social media they got a big win. You know, it's quite hard to keep up if it's school or if it's semi-junior rugby. Well, obviously they got a big win, and it was against Peebles, and you know, during the week, and that's it just seems, you know, Gala are a team that I think are maybe a couple of years off being one of the big teams because of lack of player numbers recently that we've had, but you know, they're trying to restructure the way that they deliver rugby, and you know, again, being at Borders College, there's a lot of rugby people there, you know, maybe not rugby players themselves, but they've maybe got sons and daughters who are playing rugby in the area, and it's always said, as long as they're playing rugby, and you know, Gala over the last few years have been able to get people playing rugby, but maybe not too competitively up towards the top. And this restructure that they want to try and get everyone under the one umbrella will hopefully help them and you know, get a little bit more success, because everybody likes playing rugby when they're winning, and they want to keep that and get that mentality into their club.
So lots of rugby ahead this weekend, and of course we wish everyone all the best, and Scotland as well against Australia on the Sunday. And we'll be back in 7 days' time. My thanks to Dale Clancy, of course, here as always, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.